Arguably one of the best examples of a spin-off game, Halo 3 ODST offers a unique experience within the Halo franchise. This title has the player stepping into the boots of members of an ODST squad assaulting the Prophet of Regret's Covenant carrier stationed above New Mombasa during the events of Halo 2. The Master Chief's absence from the title shifts the tone from the series from grand and epic to solemn and grounded. With a great atmosphere, familiar Halo 3 gameplay, compelling new characters, and an honest telling of the harsh realities of war, Halo 3 ODST checks all of the boxes and offering intrigue within an established franchise. While reacquainting myself with the game over the past few months for recording this video, I decided to poke around the current discourse surrounding this title. To my excitement, people seem to have a new appreciation for this game that may not have been as enthusiastic upon its release back in 2009 due to its short runtime and hefty $60 price for the amount of content it provided. Besides those major criticisms, I saw that some suggested that the game did not make the player feel like an ODST as much as it could or should have. Most of the videos that I had watched did not touch on this subject further, so I'd like to discuss if this game succeeds at making the player feel like an ODST or just a reskin of a Spartan super soldier. I will be going through as many elements of the game as I can and examine how they made me feel more ODST or Spartan-like. I will be using my legendary playthrough footage of the campaign as the backdrop save for the levels Data Hive and Coastal Highway, which were corrupted when downloaded from Twitch. So you'll see me playing on normal for those levels. Like I stated earlier, the game is an excellent example of an effective spin-off game of a major franchise. The campaign has few references to the major Halo story and opts to keep the focus on a more intimate story centered around an ODST squad. All members have their own quirks and personality traits shown effectively in the opening cutscene. In this short scene, we get a sense of the stakes and relationships among the characters. John Halo doesn't make his appearance here, and that works well to the game's strength. The gameplay runs from the Halo 3 engine, allowing for some familiar gameplay. Out of all the Halo titles, I find the Halo 3 engine to be the most satisfying for PvE gameplay. There are some extra features in the mix to make the experience feel a bit more unique, although I will admit that the envelope could have been pushed a bit further here. The decision to use the Halo 3 engine was likely due to the developers having a limited time to ship the game out while also focusing on Halo Reach. The major aspect that sets this game apart is the atmosphere. The music and environment seamlessly mesh with one another to create a Halo game that feels special, yet still pays respects to the sibling titles. This is mostly showcased in the pseudo-open world of New Mombasa streets, where the dimly lit abandoned city is highlighted through beautiful music, making the player feel like a lone detective. Cue the saxophone. To start the analysis, I will be taking a look at the game's gameplay mechanics. Most of these elements are systems the player uses in order to engage with the core gameplay loop. The mechanics is where some players felt the game more or less made them feel like a Spartan and not a vulnerable average Joe of an ODST by comparison. Based on the lore, ODSTs are the next best thing to Spartan super soldiers, but lack the superhuman qualities that they exhibit. The first mechanic that stands out is the health system. The ODSTs are not equipped with shields like a Spartan, so the system is more akin to Halo Combat Evolved's health system. When the player is damaged, the screen turns a sickly blood red color that indicates the player is hurt. While this system is weaker than the shield system of previous games, it does take a while before the player can die, even on Legendary. I found that on my Legendary playthrough that it did not make much of a difference on difficulty or immersion when compared to Halo 3's Legendary experience. I essentially found myself at no less of a disadvantage when compared to playing as Master Chief. The player has to grab health packs littered across the level or the map to replenish the bar at the top of the HUD. But this was more or less of a system using Combat Evolved and Reach, making it not too big of an adjustment for me. To wrap up our first mechanic of health, I'd say I felt like a Spartan here because I still feel relatively strong like a Spartan, besides my need to search for a health pack here and there. I found this was more apparent on lower difficulties where I only needed to grab a health pack once or twice per level, sometimes not at all. The two weapons that are new to this game are the silenced SMG and silenced pistol. Both of these weapons feel great to use, especially the pistol. Its detached scope and easy headshot potential make it a great weapon to replace the battle rifle or DMR from other games. The silenced SMG is my favorite iteration of the gun thanks to its new scope. I find that this weapon is more viable at longer distances and easier to control the recoil. The SMG in this game acts more like a pseudo-rifle versus the bullet hose it was from games prior. These two weapons work well to make the player feel different since they often start levels with either or both of these weapons. I will say that the silencers could have had a greater silencing and stealth effect on gameplay, but I still found these incredibly fun and different to use when compared to the typical Spartan arsenal. These two weapons were enough to make me feel different from a Spartan in a way that made the ODST arsenal feel special. As a side note, the lack of dual wielding helps to make the player feel different from Chief. While I enjoy dual wielding, it makes sense it's not present here. Ripping turrets is still present in ODST, which feels kind of awkward given that I never saw Marines from Halo 3 doing this. I found this inclusion a bit odd as I always thought that Chief could rip turrets because of his augmented strength. This mechanic didn't make me feel powerful in ODST and instead made me feel out of place. For example, seeing all of my squad mates manhandling Gatling turrets and missile pods on the level NMPD HQ was epic, but also kind of weird. Speaking of feeling like a stealth soldier, the night vision mechanic in this game is great. Using this to navigate the new Mombasa streets at night is very engaging. It makes me feel like I have a fair and unique advantage being an ODST. The way it highlights allies and enemies in the area is a nice touch. I often found that the green hue of the night vision aided to the overall atmosphere of the nighttime levels. I still find this to be the best version of night vision in the series over Reach's iteration. There's something about the highlighting of the enemies and allies that makes this night vision feel unique and futuristic when looking at other military games that include a similar feature. ODSTs have an extra grenade thanks to their increased ammo capacity when compared to Spartans. I found that this small change was nice, but not enough to make me feel different from the previous games as Master Chief. The grenade throw always catches me off guard every time I play this game. It's more of a lob than the usual fastballs that Chief can dish out. The arc is rather awkward and takes a bit of time to get used to. The lob throw makes for a realistic change that makes the player feel less powerful than Chief in this instance. The jump in this game seems a bit less floaty than that of Chief's. There's not much more to say other than that the limited range of the jump was needed to make the player feel more grounded, pun intended. The inclusion of stealth mechanics in addition to the night vision and the weapons could have pushed the envelope of this game in a positive direction. I never felt like I was getting the jump on a squad of Covenant for very long, even in the darker levels of Mombasa streets. Combat more or less initiated the same as it would had I been playing as a Spartan. I wish the game had the player choose a way to take out the Covenant squads more methodically through the use of stealth versus simply having the choice of to start shooting or to sidestep them. This all just seems like a missed opportunity to make the player feel unique. Much like the combat flow, the enemies themselves have not changed much. You get to fight the same amount of Covenant as you would if you were playing any other title. Smaller numbers that presented greater difficulty that required more planning from the player could have really sold the idea that the player was a lone soldier. We'll get into this concept more when looking at the levels specifically, but in most instances, the enemy count seemed unchanged to me. The ODSTs can pilot the same vehicles as Spartans, including Covenant craft, which doesn't bother me in most instances here, since Marines could do this in other games. There wasn't much change in the vehicles to make a difference in my experience here. As a side note, piloting a Banshee in Kikowani Station feels particularly weird to me. I don't mind the squad relying on Mickey piloting the Phantom, but Buck flying a Banshee on the last level where you get to play as him felt out of place for his character. There's something about it that seems like this was a last-minute idea in development. The game operates similarly to Halo 3's difficulty. It's not too challenging to the point where it's frustrating or cheap like Combat Evolved or Halo 2 Legendary difficulty at some points, although there aren't any unfair enemies or encounters that I can recall. Going from Halo 3 to ODST on a Legendary playthrough didn't make much of a difference for me. There could have been much more done here to make the game feel difficult, or at an overall fair disadvantage to make the player truly feel like an ODST. Playing on lower difficulties felt very similar to Halo 3's version as well, if not easier. The story and campaign centers around playing the game as a detective when roaming the Mombasa streets in search of rookie squad members. I really like this idea of mystery and searching for clues to unravel the mystery of what happened to them. This detective approach is something that is far removed from being a Spartan and the usual blow stuff up approach. The inclusion of Virgil as an assistant was well done too. It's a nice parallel to Chief and Cortana's relationship without it feeling like it's just straight up copying. Going around the city finding audio logs and hunting down clues makes for a simple yet effective approach to spice up the Halo formula. It reminds me of playing through BioShock a bit, which definitely is a good thing. This kind of environmental storytelling is something that I'd love to see in future Halo titles. The environments of the game are rather unique to the Halo series overall. Getting a fuller picture of what a modern city on Earth looks like was well executed in this title. Spending most of the game in the city helped to build upon levels in other games like Outskirts, Metropolis, and The Storm that take place on Earth. New Mombasa at night offers some beautiful visuals, especially in night vision mode. Other environments such as the police station and the Oni site are visually indicative of human advancements and futuristic architecture and offer something different from Covenant or Forerunner backdrops. Seeing those streets empty at night can be rather haunting. With most of the missions and campaign taking place at night, it makes for a moody and intimate experience. The rain helps to highlight the uniqueness of the environment as well. With the rain coming down as you hunt for clues as the rookie helps to hammer this lonely and grounded atmosphere home for the player and the overall experience of the game. Another aspect of the environment or spaces the player finds themselves in is the opening cutscene inside of the drop pod. Experiencing that moment of dropping onto the carrier with your squad mates was well done in setting the mood and new characters. It might be my favorite opening cutscene in the Halo series besides the Halo 2 Arbiter scenes that start the game. Overall, these elements of the environment make the player feel like an ODST in a believable and engaging manner. On the flip side, some levels resemble large-scale battles that make for a more Spartan-like experience akin to other games in the series. Levels like Uplift Reserve, Kikowani Station, and Coastal Highway are more Spartan-like to me. The large-scale battles simply do not lend themselves to making me feel like an ODST, where I am more limited in my capabilities. God damn, the music in this game is good. Not only is it unique to the series, but it simply brings out the best of what the game is trying to accomplish with its mood and storytelling. Listening to the somber saxophone croon with rain pouring on the dark Mombasa streets is perfect. Marty O'Donnell and Michael Salvatore are at the top of their game here. I think we can all agree that the music goes above and beyond in enhancing the story set in the Halo universe that doesn't revolve around Chief. This is the one that simply speaks for itself. It's just that good. The music from ODST beautifully elevates the noir and detective elements of the game in order to highlight this unique player experience within the franchise. So let's get into the levels of the game. Like I mentioned earlier, these are extremely short, with some of them having a par time of around 5 to 10 minutes. This might be my biggest criticism of the game, in that it is simply too short. Not for the money I paid for it, but because I wanted more. When looking at all the levels, I can't say any of them are very bad. They're all pretty good, with a lot to offer in a small package. There aren't any levels that make me want to skip them, such as the library or Cortana, making for a consistent playthrough of the campaign. I will say this is true unless playing Coastal Highway on Legendary. For those who know, that level is horrible on higher difficulties due to the inconsistent friendly AI. But I digress. Let's get into each level and see how they present themselves to the player's experience and immersion. Tayari Plaza serves as a nice step in intensity without being overly bombastic like some of the later levels. It still feels grounded enough to make the player feel like a step up from the usual Marines, but not at the level of a Spartan for the most part. Using the night vision between buildings was a cool addition to this level that I wish was more present in other levels in the game. Interacting with the environment in this way made me feel like I had a fair advantage. Using buildings as a way to flank enemies added to the sense of having the, quote, home field advantage. The discourse between Buck and Dare is nice here, as it helps to establish their relationship and gives a clear picture of what war is like for those in the UNSC, especially when discussing the dead elites. This is a great example of a level that is more ODST in nature when compared to other Halo titles. Uplift Reserve is where things go from 0 to 100 very quickly. Playing as Dutch immediately sets the tone that not every mission will be this tight quarters skirmish through the city streets. This level takes place in a large safari park where most of the level is spent in a vehicle. While piloting vehicles doesn't make me feel like a Spartan or ODST on its own, the sheer level of Covenant forces being thrown at the player seems a bit out of place for being an ODST game. Here I feel like I was the single-digit reinforcement again, similar to how Chief might show up on the scene to turn the tide of a battle. The level just appears to be too much for an ODST to realistically handle on their own. Here I just felt like a reskinned Spartan. Kazingo Boulevard took some time for me to think about. Playing as Mickey positions the player to be the only one of the soldiers to be able to drive the tank. This was a good instance of making the player feel specialized in a given combat scenario without making them feel too powerful. This only negated in later levels when it seems all squad members can just drive anything they want. Navigating the streets in a tank reinforces that urban combat I liked from earlier in Tayari Plaza. It's really satisfying to roll up and take back these streets from the invading force. The last section is also a great set piece, as being pinned down is something the player doesn't always experience as Chief very often. Being up against the wall is a great position that makes a mission feel more ODST-like to me. Holding a position or being cornered is something that this game utilizes often and successfully. This is a great level that makes use of the urban landscape while keeping the combat mostly grounded. The larger force the player is faced against makes more sense because they are given a tank right at the start as opposed to the previous mission. Oni Alpha Site is a great example of a dynamic level despite being rather short. Being on the retreat throughout the mission is a great way to make the Covenant feel imposing, which aids to the immersion of being an ODST. Blowing up the bridge, retreating to the building, and clearing out the rooftop for evac collectively make the player feel like the invading force is infinite in number. Cooperating with the forces at the Oni Alpha site was a nice touch here as well. It's a great way to highlight how different groups of military, police, etc. within the city have to band together in order to stand a chance. There's also a sense of mystery as Mickey and Dutch aren't fully aware of the other force's objectives. This contrasts the experience as Chief in other games where the operation and objectives are generally clear or relayed to him. In Oni Alpha side, I felt like I was trying to get my job done while other groups had their own objectives in mind. NMPD HQ is a personal favorite of mine. Playing as Romeo, we get to see his relationship with Buck play out more clearly. Their banter back and forth and Buck's willingness to go to great lengths to save his squad highlights the bond they all have, even if they are not always on the same page. The teamwork with Romeo sniping and Buck drawing forces out plays out well in this level design. My favorite section of the level was the final standoff where the pair link back up with Mickey and Dutch. This section is a fun encounter with Banshees and Phantoms striking the group's makeshift defense position. I will note that ripping the turrets feels a bit strange, as I mentioned earlier, but the moment of having most of the squad back together and working together to repel the Covenant aircraft makes up for this awkwardness. I wish the game had favored bombastic moments like this, where it would only take place as part of the mission versus the entire level, like Uplift, Kikawani, or Coastal Highway. Using these moments in spurts makes the louder moments feel earned and more satisfying when playing as an ODST, in my opinion. Kikawani Station is my least favorite level out of the bunch. It's not a bad level per se, it just doesn't have any memorable qualities in my view. Piloting a Banshee just feels weird. I don't mind getting into a Ghost or other Covenant craft, but something about flying a Banshee as an ODST takes me out of the experience a bit. The level doesn't have many interesting moments, as most of the level consists of flying ahead to open the door so the rest of the squad can get through in their stolen Phantom. I would have rather preferred that the level opted for a quiet exit from the city versus taking on a Scarab and a whole host of forces in aerial combat. I also don't know why they couldn't directly fly the Phantom out of the city like they did in the final cutscene versus having to go through all these gates. To me, it just feels like a throwaway level that made me feel like an ODST Spartan hybrid. All in all, the level didn't really know what it wanted to be. Alongside NMPD HQ, Data Hive is my favorite level. The atmosphere of the level sort of operates as an extension of New Mombasa streets. The way enemies are thrown at the player work very well, as they tend to come in small squads. Additionally, the night vision works very well in this level, setting the tone as a covert secret area of the city. The night vision almost feels required, just like the streets above. The encounter with the drone hive is much like the rooftop standoff on NMPD HQ. It's a bombastic section that feels grounded in the ODST wheelhouse. The drones are a personal favorite Covenant enemy of mine, so getting that extra spotlight in this level definitely won me over. However, I do wish that there was a secret sequence or pathway the player could take to avoid the hive entirely to add a bit of stealth to the mission. This would make for a great hidden encounter that could heighten the player tension as they traverse through the hive. Overall, it's a great level that successfully builds on the rookie's journey through the city streets prior, making for a great atmosphere and experience in a more ODST fashion. Like some of the levels, I did not feel like an ODST here at all. The chaotic nature of the level is very similar to that of Kikawani Station and Uplift Reserve. The amount of enemy forces that need to be punched through sets the gameplay up to be more Spartan-like in my view. Using the tank as the rookie is a bit weird as well. The guy named the Rookie can just hop in a tank and know how to use it right away. To be fair, the solo combat of the Rookie previously had the same logical issue, but being able to just hop in the tank seemed a bit odd to me. It doesn't have the same close and tight feeling as Kazingo Boulevard had. Like Kikowani Station, this could have been another opportunity to get out of the city quietly, especially since they had to escort the engineer. The last standoff section feels a little flat as well, especially when compared to NMPD standoff. Had the level consisted of more stealth that led to the same standoff at the end, then maybe it would have had more of an impact for me. Here I just felt like John Halo again, blasting away similar to Metropolis in Halo 2. The level is beautiful though, with its skyline being glassed by Covenant carriers, and Buck's reaction to this was a nice touch, but the level just ends on a loud exit that I feel doesn't evoke the idea of playing as an ODST in my view. Again, this exit wasn't really earned in my opinion. While some of the levels lack the ODST feel, the characters do a great job of making up for those shortcomings. Much like Chief, the Rookie carries the silent protagonist motif very well. He is a bit too overpowered based on the situations he's put into, but at least the encounters were gradually more difficult as the campaign went on. Buck is a great representation of the hardened veteran who has seen it all. His reaction to the carrier's glassing of the city on Coastal Highway was well showcased, and his responsibility to his men was well articulated quality in his dialogue and actions. Dare serves as a great model of how Oni's influence and shady tactics make for a new and welcome intrigue to the series at the time. Her demeanor and secrecy make her a great unknown for the story. It's a fresh new take when looking at other games in this series, but it still remains within the grounded tone of the game overall. Mickey is my least favorite member. He's just sort of there. His sort of happy-go-lucky personality is overshadowed by the more compelling members of the squad in my view. Dutch is the tough guy that probably is the most Spartan-like of the bunch. He's the big gun guy. Every squad needs one. Last but not least, Romeo takes the cake as my favorite member of the squad. He operates as the foil to Buck. He and Buck both use humor and sarcasm in their demeanor, but Romeo's is more of selfishness and depression. He cares about his squad but doesn't want to admit it. His mistrust of Dare was something that I wish was further fleshed out, as it could have made for some interesting tension within the group. Generally, I found that he had the most complexity to him out of the bunch in a way that didn't feel generic or contrived. So did Halo 3 ODST really make me feel like an ODST? Yes, but it could have done a hell of a lot more to build upon that experience. I wish the game had embraced more stealth mechanics. That early reveal trailer had initiated that view when I had first seen it all those years ago. The bombastic and large-scale set pieces didn't always feel earned in my opinion. The best example of a well-earned large-scale encounter was definitely the standoff on the rooftops of NMPD HQ. It would have been interesting to see more stealth-based enemies instead of the same ones from Halo 3. Having special stealth Covenant weapons or a new stealthy enemy type would have made for some fun, dynamic encounters. Being hunted by enemies wielding these stealth weapons would have made for an interesting experience. Even some areas with camo sword elites would have filled the role to some extent. I also find that not playing as Dare was a missed opportunity. If we got to play as her sneaking to get to the superintendent, that would have made for a nice break between the louder missions in the campaign. Going back between her and Rookie and solo missions could have also shaken the pace a bit in a good way. With all of the squad members surviving, I felt like there was a lack of stakes in their relationship and the mission. If Dare or Romeo had died, it could have made for a stronger message on the harsh realities of the Human Covenant War. Thankfully, this concept was beautifully executed in Halo Reach. I also wish that the squad had reunited sooner in the campaign save for Rookie and Dare. The teamwork was some of the best parts of the campaign, and seeing the whole gang as one unit for a longer period of time could have fleshed out the relationships better, immersing the player into the ODST squad dynamics. Halo 3 ODST is an excellent entry within the Halo series and deserves as much praise as the other titles. It took some risks and ultimately succeeded. I hope that someday we see a sequel or a game that focuses on the non-specific Spartan experience, as I find that there are so many different stories one could tell. Thanks for checking out the video. This is one I've been looking forward to writing, as I've always loved the atmosphere and character relationships in this game. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. I also stream on Twitch, so please check out the link in my page description if you're interested. I'd love to hear your thoughts and stories surrounding this title. Did it make you feel like an ODST or a reskinned Spartan? Did that saxophone hit you emotionally in all the right places? If you have any interesting takes, please feel free to share. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.